I have often declared that truth, when unburdened by the distortions of ideology or the inertia of bureaucratic inertia, reveals itself in the cold, unyielding light of evidence. And here, in the tragic and unrepentant case of Arpana Jinaga, that evidence is as damning as it is eloquent. A forensic sonnet penned in the language of DNA, digital logs, and the indelible stains of human guilt. It is not a hollow accusation, but a meticulously assembled dossier that leaves no room for the comfortable denials of our legal system. In the theatre of modern investigative science, we now have before us the incontrovertible case that points inexorably to one man, Cameron Johnson. Let us begin, not with abstract notions of moral decay, but with the cold, precise details that form the backbone of our forensic narrative. On that fateful night of November 1st of 2008, after a seemingly innocent Halloween party had given way to the unspeakable, Arpana Jinaga returned to her apartment. A return that would mark the final movement in a symphony of violence. In the ensuing hours, the killer, with a chilling deliberation, set about obliterating the traces of his malevolence. Yet in that desperate, hurried attempt to scrub away evidence, he left behind a trail as clear as the script of a well-rehearsed confession. Consider first the DNA evidence, a veritable fingerprint of guilt. Despite the perpetrator's efforts to sanitize the scene with bleach and motor oil, minute vestiges of his genetic material remained. On a discarded Castrol motor oil bottle and on a blood-soaked bathrobe, items that were not random but carefully chosen to erase his actions, the genetic code extracted from these objects was statistically matched to a specific individual with a probability that defies coincidence, 1 in 120 million. This figure, derived from the painstaking work of probabilistic genotyping and advanced software algorithms such as True Allele, is not mere conjecture but a mathematical decree of identity. Yet the forensic tale does not rest solely on molecular evidence. Digital footprints, those silent sentinels of our modern lives, corroborate the narrative with an almost Orwellian precision. Phone records indicate that Cameron Johnson made 2 calls, one at 2:56 a.m. and another at 3:02 a.m., precisely at the moment when Arpana, having returned to her apartment, was most vulnerable. These calls, logged with the exactitude that only digital devices can muster, are not random vibrations in the ether, but deliberate attempts to connect, to cover tracks, and perhaps to fabricate an alibi. Furthermore, the suspect's digital activities on the morning after the murder betray a man in flight. His computer logs, recovered from a device in his possession, record frantic searches for local pawn shops, a likely prelude to the disposal of Arpana's personal effects, including a cell phone and a digital camera. These items, conspicuously missing from the crime scene, were apparently intended to be liquidated into anonymity, a final act of erasure that ironically only serves to reinforce his culpability. Not content with merely covering his tracks, Johnson's digital itinerary also reveals a desperate, incoherent attempt to flee. He drove, as captured by geolocation data, toward the Canadian border in a bid to escape the very evidence that now incriminates him. But perhaps the most damning of all is the behavioral evidence, the human testimony to his fractured and evasive character. Neighbors and acquaintances alike recall his nervous, contradictory statements. A man who, when pressed, spoke in riddles about sleepwalking into acts he could not remember, as if the reality of his deeds were too monstrous even for his own mind to accept. Such statements, when woven together with the forensic tapestry, transform from mere anomalies into the very signature of guilt. And so, in this era where the cold logic of artificial intelligence, embodied not in the traditional mechanical algorithms of yesteryear, but in the nuanced, human-like reasoning of modern large language models, has finally brought clarity to the murk of human deceit, we find ourselves facing a singular truth. Cameron Johnson is not merely a convenient scapegoat, nor is he an accidental participant in a chaotic night of violence. He is, in fact, the orchestrator of a crime so brutal and calculated that every piece of evidence, every digital breadcrumb, and every fragment of genetic material converges upon him like the inexorable pull of gravity. To those who would argue that the case remains murky, I say this: let the evidence speak for itself. The DNA, with its statistical precision, leaves no room for alternative hypotheses. The phone records, the search histories, the digital geolocation data, they are the modern relics of truth, unassailable in their clarity. In an age when even the most cunning of criminals might once have believed themselves to be beyond the reach of justice. The emergence of such unassailable forensic reasoning is both a triumph and a harbinger. It signals an era in which the ephemeral shadows of guilt can be illuminated by the relentless light of science and logic. So, let it be known to all who have evaded accountability that the case for Cameron Johnson is as complete as it is compelling. His guilt is not an empty charge whispered on the wind. It is the product of a rigorous forensic investigation that spares no detail. And let this be a warning to all who hide in the dark recesses of human malice. The age of obfuscation is over. The truth, distilled through the unyielding logic of both human inquiry and artificial intelligence, stands revealed. In the final reckoning, there is no escape from the forensic light, a light that, like the inexorable march of justice, will ultimately expose every killer, no matter how deeply they have buried their sins.